There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Do you read a lot of Californian literature?
I suppose I read some. I'm trying to think if there's any like particular authors. I haven't really sought it out, although I went home a couple of years ago for a trip, and we went up to Skye, which is one of the Scottish Islands off the west coast. And I stopped in Fort William, and I went into a bookshop, and I bought Nan Shepherd's Living Mountain, which is about the north of Scotland, and I bought John Muir's My First Summer in the Sierra. So I went all the way home just to buy a book that was about my doorstep, basically.
That's great. Nan Shepherd is Scottish, right?
Yeah, Nan Shepherd's
Yeah.
Scottish.
But the other
Did
one
you
is,
mention one of her novels recently?
yeah, I've hauled them. Haven't read them.
Yeah.
I think when I sit in my chair, I'm always looking at it. Anyway, one of them, maybe it's that one that I have, and I'm really looking forward to giving it a try. So.
Yeah.
Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventures put me on to Nan Shepherd.
Oh, cool.
And apparently Nan Shepherd and Jessie Kesson had a chance meeting just before or while Jessie Kesson was writing her debut, and Nan Shepherd ended up becoming a mentor to her. So
oh, nice. That's cool.
Caught wind of. So what else have you been reading that you're excited about and would recommend?
I just got into a Chilean author called Alejandro Zambra.
Ah, right. And he's not a novelist?
No, he's a novelist as well, but the first books I bought of his were Fitzcarraldo editions. So there's a short story collection called My Documents, which I actually, when I first started reading it, I started on my Kindle, and I was just like, I knew that they'd published two of his books, and I totally thought it was a memoir when I started reading it, because his stories are so like they just include details that like had to have happened to him. It feels like you could only have like written it down after it happened to you. So I was really taken with that. And then I'd also bought another one of his books called Not to Read, which is more kind of essays and criticism.
I looked that up. I had already saved it. Somebody was talking about it on Twitter or BookTube, and so I'd saved it to my Scribd library. And last night, to prepare for this interview, I read the first paragraph. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read it and then let you kind of riff on it, take it where you want about his writing. This is from an essay called Obligatory Readings. The opening paragraph, I love it. I still remember the day when the teacher turned to the chalkboard and wrote the words test, next, Friday, Madame, Bovary, Gustave, Flaubert, French. With each word, the silence grew, and by the end, the only sound was the sad squeaking of the chalk. By that point, we had already read long novels, almost as long as Madame Bovary, but this time, the deadline was impossible. Barely a week to get through a 400-page book. We were starting to get used to those surprises, though. We had just entered the National Institute. We were 12 or 13 years old, and we knew that from then on, all the books would be long.
It's so good.
So talking about reading books, that when you have to read a book, you typically don't like it.
Yeah, he has a lot. I think in that piece and in other pieces where he's talked about being taught to read literature and just having all of the joy completely squeezed out of it, and how the way that it's taught is just dreadful, and it's almost like a miracle that any of us come back around to being readers. I really like his sense of humor as well. He has that kind of very droll sensibility.
Now, he's actively now, like, is he a young man, old man? I don't know anything about him.
I think he's in his 40s, and he's written a few novellas. He has, I think there's 3 novellas. He's the first author in a long time where I read My Documents, and then I read that one piece and Not to Read, and I was like, I need the rest of them. And so he has a novella called Bonsai, which is kind of hard to get a hold of, but you can get an ebook.
I've heard about
Private
that.
Lives of Trees.
And he's written quite a bit of poetry too.
I haven't read any of his poetry. I know that he had a mentor who was a famous Chilean poet. And he also has a novel that's written in the style of the tests that they were given. And at the Institute, they did like these nationalized tests. And so he has a novel that's written in the form of a test. And so you take the test. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds like quite an experience.
Sounds great. Are you somebody who likes to read the entire oeuvre of a writer?
I don't tend to like do it on purpose. Someone like Otessa Moshfegh only has a few books. And so, over the course of a couple of years, it's easy to get to all of them. I think maybe I'm getting more like that. And there's a few authors I really like that I've read all of their work more recently. Valerie Luiselli is one of them. She's a Mexican author. Jenny Diski, who I think I mentioned to you.
You did, but I don't know much about her. I got her mixed up with she's not a German novelist, right?
No.
Because when you said the name, I was thinking of, oh, I know who I was thinking of. I was thinking of Esther Kinsky.
Oh, okay. I've not
So
heard of her.
so tell me about her.
About Jenny Diski. She was a writer for the London Review of Books, so she did a lot of criticism. She was actually lived with Doris Lessing for a time.
Oh.
She was adopted, or not adopted, but she was kind of like a ward of Doris Lessing's.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, she had two terrible parents, basically, so she had like a horrible upbringing. I found her because she's written a book called Stranger on a Train. So she came to the US and she took a train basically around all of the borders. And it was just fascinating because she would write about, she'd be sitting in a smoking car talking to a young guy who's a soldier, and he'd say something like accidentally profound. And then she'd be like, oh, and this reminds me of this other thing. And then she winds back to her childhood and then tells you about like, something that happened with her dad or some like puzzle piece of who she is as a person.
And I found that was fiction or memoir or?
This one was a memoir. She's written like 10 or 12 novels, which I'm going to work my way through. But her memoirs were the thing that like really got me onto her.
And did she get along with Doris Lessing? I wonder what it was like. Has she written a memoir about life with Doris?
They actually had an agreement that they wouldn't write about each other. But then later in her life, Doris Lessing wrote a character that was very like Jenny Diski. And so then I think after Lessing passed, Jenny Diski wrote another collection, which started as diaries for LRB. And it was around the time that she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And I think she wrote more about their relationship at that point. But I haven't got to that one yet because I'm kind of like savoring them. I don't want to run out of her books. So
that sounds fascinating. Oh my God. So this is a new writer for me. The name was vaguely familiar, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You've certainly hooked me. As you know, I have been working my way through Barbara Pym's complete works in publication order. And I've just earlier this week started her last novel. And it's thankfully really good.
Oh, that's good.
They published a memoir of hers, just extracts from her letters that I haven't read yet. So that will be the final one. Feeling quite bereft. I'm immediately going to start rereading them in publication order because I started this about 4 or 5 years ago. Now, this was because of Thomas of the Readers. He loves Barbara Pym, and I'd never really probably even heard of her. So, what he said. So
did you say I wanted to read all of her books, or did you just start from the beginning to try it? Or
I think I just decided to start with her debut, and then I loved it so much that I then decided, okay, I'm going to read them all in publication order. And that's the first time I've ever done that. I started doing it with Muriel Spark, and Muriel Spark in small doses is okay, but no. I didn't get very far.
Yeah, I've only read a few Muriel Spark books with mixed results. I did actually buy her, it was called an essay collection, but it was just like a collection of her writings from throughout her life. And I read a few of them and I was like, ugh.
So I loved The Driver's Seat, if that's the right title.
Oh yeah, The Driver's Seat's great.
And I studied The Comforters in university as an undergrad and remembered really liking it. But it was when I got to that during this reading her collected works, because they were all reprinted from Scotland 2 years ago because of the centenary of her birth. So I was collecting them, and Adam and I and a bunch of others were reading them. And by the Comforters, I believe, was her. Anyway, I don't remember the sequence now, but I wasn't enjoying The Comforters as much as I had remembered enjoying it, and I bailed, and I just...
Hey, well, this is Editing Shawn. I was quite confused about this chronology of all these buddy reads and Muriel Spark novels, but let me clarify. The Comforters in 1957 was Muriel Spark's debut. I've talked about it. I've just mentioned it, and I got along with that reread pretty well. Her second novel, the 1958 novel, Robinson, was awful, absolutely awful. And then when I got to the 1959 novel, Memento Mori, there's a famous booktube channel by that name, isn't there? Even though I'd read it before and liked it, I was so fed up with Muriel Spark. I think Robinson had left a bad taste in my mouth. So that's what I was misremembering in this segment of the chat.
Do you think you'll go back to her?
Well, this year I did read the only one of hers because we had a Memento Mori-a-thon for Adam.
That's right.
And so I didn't want him to be too happy with me. So I chose his favorite writer, Muriel Spark, but I chose the one book by Muriel Spark that he has never been able to finish because he didn't like it. And it's called...
Her centenary was crazy back home. There's just so much stuff around her. Yeah.
The Mandelbaum Gate.
Oh,
and
that's right.
I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. So
Mhm.
I don't know that I'll pick up another one of hers, but maybe. But I need a lot of space between them because
Yeah.
I don't really jive with her worldview.
Yeah, same.
Not that I would be able to express what her worldview is, but she's not a comfortable kind of writer for me to
Yeah,
see.
I know what you mean.
So my favorite writer when I was much younger was Michael Cunningham, gay American novelist, and I was reading pretty much everything that he'd published, and then I got into his more recent stuff and didn't really like it, so I stopped.
I think the only one I've ever tried to read was The Hours.
The Hours is one of his best, yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think it was a bit too...
Oh, you didn't like it? Okay.
Well, I didn't get very far. I only read maybe like 10 pages and I was like, oh, I'm not really in the mood for, it was quite kind of prim, and I'm sure it doesn't stay that way, but it was just it wasn't really what I was in the mood for.
Well, that certainly happens, the wrong book at the wrong time or whatever. I loved it. I don't remember it as well. I read it more than 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Are you a Virginia Woolf fan?
I've only read A Room of One's Own, I think. I've always meant to get around to more of her stuff, but I haven't done it.
Well, the good thing is you're young. You'll
still be there.
Lots of time.
Yeah. Another author that I've read almost their entire oeuvre at this point is Deborah Levy. I know you're a fan of hers.
She's hit and miss with me, but I loved Hot Milk.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. And bailed on an early collection of novellas. I don't remember what it was called now, but didn't like those. And I didn't get along with this. You did. Yeah. You liked it, right? I
liked it. I wasn't sure what it was that had put you off. You had alluded to something later in the book, and I couldn't work out what it was.
The second half, like this, the perspective changes about halfway through. I thought there was a pretty even divide, but now I'm not finding it.
It changes in time, but I don't know if it changes in the narrator.
Changes in time.
Back to the 80s when he lived in East Berlin.
That's what it is. And nothing after that change in time worked for me. I just didn't like it happened after.
I thought it was interesting the way that she kind of rebuilds the pieces, because you're not really sure what he's remembering. It is a difficult one to talk about because the second part kind of deconstructs it to an extent as well. I think I just was constantly waiting to see how it was all going to come together, because it is quite fragmented and it plays with memory, and kind of you're trying to work out like what really happened. And the guy's very like conceited, and he doesn't really see his own flaws, but he feels hard done by, and so you kind of wonder how much of that kind of colors his experience of his life. And there was an interesting character study in that way.
Glad it worked for you. It certainly worked for a lot of readers, just didn't work particularly for me. Yeah. Anything else of hers that you would recommend?
I actually came to her through her memoirs as well.
I hear gushing praise for her memoirs, and I haven't got to any of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one called The Things I Don't Want to Know, which I actually bought because it was like one of those little like great ideas series, the penguin ones, and it has like little slivers of philosophy and things like that. And so it was in that style. It says on the cover that it's like a response to George Orwell's How I Write. And so I thought it was going to be like a direct response, but if you didn't know that, you would have no way of knowing that. I think she might have borrowed like the subheadings and that was about it. But that one was really interesting. And then her second one's called The Cost of Living, and that one's just amazing. It's just kind of like a snapshot in time. I'm upset because she was on Literary Friction at one point, and she said that she's going to write one for every decade of her life, which means that you have to wait almost 10 years for another one. It's like, Deborah, you don't know how long you're going to live. I need more of these. Yeah.
That just somehow brought Allie Smith into my brain. Are you an Allie Smith fan?
I've only read a couple of her shorter pieces. I'm not really into her seasonal quartet thing.
You're not?
No, there's something about the immediacy, because there's so much happening in the world at the moment, and it's so frenetic, and I think it's going to take time to really like untangle the cause and effect of our current era, and so trying to write it down as it happens to me doesn't feel very interesting.
I loved, the first one was autumn, right?
Yep.
And I loved it. And so that means the second one was winter, and I thought I loved it, but it's not aging well in my memory, and I haven't read anything since then, but I'm wondering if I might just stop reading them and pick them up in 10 years.
Right.
And see how they feel with some distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not that I'll never read them, but I don't really see the appeal, to be honest.
Anything else by her that you've liked better?
I read, is it Girl Meets Boy? And maybe that's all I've read. I've seen her in person a few times. She speaks a lot in Glasgow and Scotland in general. At the Edinburgh Book Festival, I've seen her. And she's a really good speaker. I don't know why I've just not really gone around to her work.
Well, I think she's a little bit of a Marmite writer. I loved Autumn. I loved half of, what is it called? How Not to Be Both. Is that right?
How to Be Both.
How to Be Both. Maybe for me, it was How Not to Be Both. I loved half of it. And
How to Be One or the Other.
I didn't like the Renaissance part of the story.
Mm.
Just didn't have the visceral pull of the teenage girl who I absolutely adored.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a lot of people loved that novel completely, utterly. So I may go back to it another time.
Yeah, that was one of those ones that I meant to get to. I think she just has books that people are really into in the moment, and so I kind of want to wait until the hype dies down, and then by the time the hype dies down, I'm like, oh, I don't know, I'm very interested.
I certainly do need to wait until the hype dies down,
Mm-hmm.
and I can create my new drama anew, like when I read Normal People
Yeah.
a year and a half after everybody else did.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about Normal People? I know that you didn't.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I liked it. I think I liked it more than Conversations with Friends. Yeah, I read both of her books on planes, like in a single sitting, and so I don't really know how I would feel about them if I read them in my usual habits.
That's interesting.
I feel like I might have like got tired of the characters or not cared as much. But I did like Normal People more than Conversations with Friends. And then I watched the TV show and I liked that even more than the book. So I think you're going to enjoy the show when you get to it.
I can't wait. Connell.
I didn't think that Connell was so sympathetic in the book, but the show convinced me.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, I loved him in the book. I couldn't finish Conversations with Friends, and I may go back and give it another try. I was doing it on audio without the benefit of the text. You know, it could have been just the narration, but I would be much more excited just to see what she does next.
Yeah, definitely, me too.
She's definitely a writer to watch, as they say.
Yeah.
What stoked my interest in her, despite that negative reaction to Conversations with Friends, was her single short story that was published as part of the Faber Anniversary series. I loved it so much. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to read Normal People.
Is it Salaryman?
Salaryman, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I read that one. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Yeah, good. Actually, no, it's Mr. Salary.
Mr. Salary, that's right.
Salaryman is Japanese English expression.
Right, yeah.
That, but no, Mr. Salary. Yeah, it was really good.
Salary.
Are you a big short story reader or not so much?
Not really. I think my documents, because it hoodwinked me and I thought it was a memoir, I think that's why I liked it so much. And then The Homesick for Another World, I liked some parts of it. I don't really reach for short stories very often. There are collections that I've really enjoyed, but for some reason I don't really seek them out. I do like essays though. I read quite a lot of essays.
And I don't. So for a reader like me who isn't really all that into essays, what would be a good one to start with?
Oh, that's a good question. I wish I thought about that more before I brought it up. I'm trying to look at a good one to start with always is Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. It's famous for a reason, you know.
I think I even used to have it on my shelf. I have some autographed Joan Didions around somewhere.
Oh, nice. There's a Californian.
Yes, very doesn't get much more Californian. The problem that I have with essays, if they are autobiographical essays, is the same problem that I have with autobiography. I just, in so many instances, I can't get past the self-centeredness. And I know the self-centeredness is built into the form, but it just usually makes me, oof. So I'd much rather read a novel for that reason.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I think I've found a bit of a niche of, these tend to be women in their 40s and they're kind of looking back on things with the benefit of hindsight. And I feel like I can learn a bit from them. I think that's one of the things I like about it. But there are forms of essays that work better in the moment. I love reading Rebecca Solnit every time she's in Lit Hub or in The Guardian. But I bought a few of her books and I sit down to read them and I'm like, don't know why it just doesn't work in that format for me.
That's so interesting. I have not shared this publicly on BookTube, and I may edit this out because I don't want to have everybody hate me, but I started to read her collection. I don't know if it was a collection of essays or what the hell it was, but it was the Encyclopedia of Trouble and Spaciousness or something.
Oh.
The title itself was pretentious enough to put me off, but then in the introduction, she mentioned that she was going to be writing about places that she had never visited, and that was
Oh, okay.
she was entitled to doing that as a writer. I mean, there was just something so arrogant and self-important about it. It was almost as if the word writer was capitalized. Like I've just and then I got halfway through the first essay and it's like, no, I haven't read very much else, but her Men Explain Things to Me is a very important essay. You know, I've heard her interviewed and she seems fine, but didn't get off on the right foot with her for that book.
Yeah, that's a shame.
So what's next? Do you plan ahead? Like, do you know what you're going to be reading next, or?
Kind of. I mean, I have a big pile of books because I just keep buying more and more books. I got nothing else to do, so I just keep buying them. So I'd like to get to the Zambra one soon.
Which one?
The Alejandro Zambra ones. I think I'm going to read The Private Lives of Trees next.
Oh.
Someone told me that Ways of Going Home was one of their favorite books, and we have a lot of tastes in common, so I kind of want to save that one for the last. What else do I have? I just got some James Baldwin. I got Notes of a Native Son. I'd like to get to soon. And I also got The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. I don't usually get around to these big nonfiction books, but I accidentally bought 2 copies, so my husband said they read that one with me.
Great. I've heard nothing but things about that, and I heard so many reviews of it. It's the kind of nonfiction book where the book review has the level of detail that I'm interested in, and I have no desire to read the book. Like, it sounds interesting, but I've heard enough. Like, that's the level of detail with which I would like to engage with that topic, and it sounds like it's a good book. I hope you enjoy it.
Do you like nature writing?
Well, I haven't read much, and I struggled with during Springathon. I bailed on a couple of things that didn't work. The nonfiction, I ended up bailing on both of them. So maybe the answer is no. I haven't given it an honest try yet. Do you?
Yeah, there's one I just thought of that I want to read soon. It's by an author from Scotland who's a poet called Kathleen Jamie, and it's called Surfacing. And she has another book that's called Sightlines, which was largely about nature. Whenever she went to St. Kilda, which is one of the really remote islands of Scotland. And there's one where she went to like a whale museum in Norway, I think. And yeah, so she has a lot of like nature writing, but it's very introspective and not necessarily about stomping around in the outdoors so much as like what she sees and how she feels about it. So I'm hoping to get to her last book as well soon, which is Surfacing.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thanks very much, Nicola. No pressure to come back, but if you come back, I would be very happy, and I know that your legions of fans would too. But thanks for, or just come back and chat on my channel regularly. You'd be welcome anytime.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you very much.
Me.